Are you ready to debate Bill Nye?
I would love to.
Okay, here we go. This is all transcription from the exact transcription from the Bill Nye Ken Ham debate. Okay. Tonight, this is his opening statement. Okay. Tonight we are going to have two stories. On TV, a crime scene show, they have modern-day science to discover evidence to convict criminals. On TV crime shows, there is no distinction made between historical science and observational science. What would you say about that?
I would disagree. I think things that people observe will carry much more weight than things that people believe because of other types of evidence. You find some bones in the ground, okay? We can observe the bones in the ground. We can conclude that these belong to an animal or a person who lived and died. Now, from there, people can make up all the wild stories they want of, when it lived. You don't know that. You found bones in the ground. You don't know when it lived or died. You don't know that it had any kids at all. And you certainly don't know it had different kids. So people sometimes try to mix their religion of evolution in with the observable science. So I think I would be cautious of that first statement and have to reserve by saying, I don't think that's correct. But go ahead, what's his next sentence?
Natural laws that applied in the past apply now. What do you have to say?
Okay. Now, if that's true, then the Big Bang Theory is stupid and can't happen. Because matter doesn't create itself and energy doesn't come from nothing. So if he wants to believe natural laws that apply today always applied, well, then there had to be a creator, a supernatural creator, something supernatural beyond natural. So if natural laws apply today and applied in the past, then cats produce cats and dogs produce dogs. No exceptions. Bill Nye does not believe what he just said. He believes something was different about these natural laws. Animals were able, first of all, matter came from nothing. That's part of the Big Bang Theory. That's not that doesn't follow the natural laws. Matter organized itself. That's the opposite of what we see. Everything becomes disorganized, disordered. Life cannot come from non-living material. And yet he believes it did. So he does not believe what he just said.
Okay.
The textbooks certainly don't teach that. Okay, what's the next one?
Yeah, okay. He says, however, according to creationists, a worldwide flood somehow influenced everything we observe in nature.
Okay, well, I think the worldwide flood would not affect everything we observe in nature. I don't know that it affected the atmosphere or the lithosphere down. That's the rock down real deep, maybe for a few miles. But no, the crust of the earth wasn't affected by this. The center of the earth wasn't affected by this flood. The stars were not affected by the flood. The sun was not affected by our flood, so I would be very cautious there. I think the flood did some incredible things to the planet, and we can see the effects of that. So yes, I think the evidence for a worldwide flood is pretty overwhelming. But I think that's kind of a broad brush he's painting with there to say it affected everything. I do think most of the features we see on the Earth, like all of the fact that we have lots of layers of rocks. I mean, go to Grand Canyon, you see hundreds of different layers. Why are they stratified or layered? Well, a flood is a very reasonable explanation for that. You can get a jar and fill it with rocks, gravel, sand, mud, dirt, grass, and water and shake it up and let it sit in 2 minutes in your hand. You'll see layers form. The rocks go to the bottom, the grass grows to the top. It's called hydrologic sorting. Water automatically sorts objects by their density or by their texture, the roughness of their surface. So yes, a flood is the best explanation of the fact that we even have layers. These layers are all full of dead things, fossilized. Millions of times fossils are found of animals that are completely intact as far as the skeletal structure, all laid out in order the way when it was living. Well, that doesn't happen today. When an animal dies, the coyotes drag it all over the woods. You find an arm bone here and a leg bone 2 miles away. So the fact that we have these skeletons that are called articulated or still attached is an indication of a very rapid burial, which the flood would do. We find clams on top of Mount Everest, for heaven's sake. Clams can't climb mountains. That doesn't mean the water was over Mount Everest, but it means Mount Everest was under the water. The Bible account is very clear that the mountains arose after the flood as the floodwaters went down. So the mountains formed as a result of the flood. Psalms 104 talks about that. Okay, so I have to disagree. What's his next sentence?
Okay. Is it really reasonable? You have to ask yourself, is it really reasonable for a 500-foot wooden boat, 8 zookeepers, to maintain 14,000 individual animals, every land planet in the world, underwater for a year?
Well, that's two different things. Yeah, so many boats out of wood have been built over 500 feet long. The dimensions of Noah's Ark, if the cubit is 20.62 inches, like it probably was, then the Noah's Ark would have been 516 feet long. Not a problem. There have been wooden boats built that big before. They tried one that had 3 or 6 masts for sails, and it twisted so bad they couldn't sail it on the ocean. And they said, see, that proves it can't be done. Well, the Noah's Ark wasn't designed to sail. It wouldn't have any mass. It was just designed to float. It only had one job, float. That was it. Didn't have to sail, didn't have to go anywhere, didn't have to, no steering, no movement, no nothing. As far as the number of kinds of animals to go on that boat, there's a website called bearminology.com. The current estimate is that land-dwelling animals, that was all Noah had to take on the ark, he didn't have to take fish, of course, there are about 8,000 kinds of animals. So he had 7 of some and 2 of the rest. So let's assume, say, 20,000 animals. And let's assume Noah's smart enough to know, hey, let's bring babies of everything. Well, then they could all fit on one floor of the ark. The feasibility of the ark being true, floating and carrying the animals, I don't think can be questioned. It certainly could have been done. But physically, not a problem.
How is it possible for 8 zookeepers to maintain 14,000 individual land animals and plants?
Okay, well, he's assuming they need to be maintained. The Bible says very clearly all the animals were vegetarian before the flood came. That's in Genesis 1:29 and 30. After the flood, man was allowed to eat animals in Genesis 9, first couple verses. So let's assume that all the animals were indeed vegetarian. Let's assume they were all friendly, which is what the Bible would teach, because after the flood, now the animals became afraid of man. No, and God didn't say they had to have cages. He said he made rooms in the ark. You would have stalls or cubby holes. The animals would go find a place, lay down. When they get hungry, they walk over to the food pile and eat. And when they want to drink, they walk over to the water pile or to the water barrels and drink. There's no maintaining to be done other than maybe shoveling up the poop once in a while. And even that, I used to raise hamsters. They would very quickly select one corner of their cage to go potty in, and you only got to clean out one corner. So I would assume that would be the same kind of thing with the animals, and Noah and his boys would only have a couple of different spots to go shovel out every day. So I think he's creating a problem where none exists. So 14,000 or 20,000 animals, they wouldn't have to feed them, wouldn't have to water them. Just have piles. Farmers will drop off huge bales of hay out in the field, and the cows go find it. They don't have to go shove it in their mouth and chew for them. Just drop off a bale of hay. They'll find it. Okay?
Okay, I'm going to act like Bill Nye here real quick. You're saying that they had clean water for 40 years on that boat in barrels? Is that what you're saying? They had clean water when they're surrounded by salt water?
Well, that would be assuming they're surrounded by salt water. I think everybody knows the oceans are getting saltier every day. They're gaining salt from the giant distillation process, no problem. So if the ocean was all fresh water during Noah's flood, just, drop buckets overboard, or have a system where every time you go over waves, it automatically refills for you. So the wave action would do it. I don't know what they did, but I don't think you could say we deny the Bible and God's account based on the fact that we don't understand the specifics of how he did it. If the ark had what's called a moon pool, a hole in the floor with walls built up inside, every time you go over a bump, over a wave, it pumps fresh air in and out of the boat, and it gives a chance to get fresh water. So if we start with the assumption that the flood was all fresh water, then it's not a problem at all. So I think, again, he's creating a problem where none exists.
He says, there is not a single place in the Grand Canyon where the fossils of one type of animal cross over into fossils of another. In other words, when there was a big flood, you'd expect drowning animals to swim to a higher level.
Well, I think think is based on first of all, it hasn't been thoroughly explored. There are plenty of fossils that haven't been found yet. Okay, that's obvious. We don't know everything out there. Plus, I think that's incorrect. I think fossils have been found in various different layers, and there's plenty of evidence of varieties of fossils found in what the evolutionists would call the wrong layer. To me, it's simple hydrologic sorting. The floods can automatically sort animals by density, body shape, habitat, etc. So you're going to find clams in the same layer because clams already live in the same layer. That's the bottom. And reptiles having a similar body density would tend to be sorted in a flood based on their body density. Of course, somebody took a huge aquarium and put a giant hot water bottle in the bottom, a couple of rubber sheets glued at the edges, and they had pierced a whole bunch of holes in this thing. And then they laid this in the bottom of the aquarium, and then they filled the aquarium with a mixture of dirt, sand, rocks, gravel, dead mice, dead animals of different kinds, reptiles, mammals, amphibians, etc. They just mixed it all together and poured it in. Then they hooked a hose up to that water bottle, and so they let the aquarium fill from the bottom with water squirting up through all these holes. The water squirting up through those holes automatically lifted the particles, and then as they settled back down, the denser ones would fall faster. And just simply by filling that aquarium from the bottom, it sorted all the mammals into one layer. All the mice and rats ended up in the same layer. Doesn't prove anything to have to do with time. It has to do with body density. Mammals have a different body density than reptiles. So the flood is the best scientific explanation of the stratification. And I don't think it's as stratified as he wants it to be. So I think we can find plenty of examples where it doesn't match that. So I think that hydrologic sorting, or sorting by water, is very logical. In my video series, part 6 about the flood, I show hundreds of examples of petrified trees that are standing up, petrified, running through multiple layers. If you Google Joggins, 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 Nova Scotia, I would assume you'll see some of the pictures over the cliffs up there with petrified trees in the vertical position running into multiple layers. It is not logical to say the layers are different ages. These petrified trees are connecting them. Cookville, Tennessee, I believe, is where the kettle mines are, coal mines. Again, they find many petrified trees in the vertical position. There's one in Alabama near Birmingham, a coal mine, where they find lots of petrified trees connecting two seams of coal. And I show all that in my video number 6 about the flood. So he is simply wrong about that. The layers all formed rapidly, probably in less than a year, like the Noah's flood would say. He mentioned something in there, you went by it and didn't come back to it, about the land plants underwater for a year. I would love to see where he gets the idea that the earth was covered for a year. I think I could show from Scripture that the Bible teaches Noah was in the ark for a year. It does not mean every square inch of the earth is covered for a full year with water. Some areas may have only been covered for a few weeks or months, and plants can survive in an inundation or submersion in water for different lengths of time, depending on the species of plant, of course. But also you got the idea that huge forests, the size of Texas, would be uprooted and floating around, where land plants can be floating with other plants, and when they finally go down and touch ground again, they reroot and grow. Plants can grow from seeds, or from cuttings, or from buds, or from roots. I mean, there's plants could grow. So that's called a straw man to say they had to survive underwater for a year. That's silly. Noah was in the ark for a year. That does not mean all the plants are underwater for a year. Read the story. Okay, next question.
Okay, this is a side note. I'm going to edit this out, but I was practicing my voice to sound like Bill Nye, so I could talk with you that way.
Okay.
Maybe next time I'll get it down packed. Okay, here we go. Most religious groups around the world do not embrace the earth as somehow 6,000 years old. That is unique.
Well, I'm working on that. I'm trying to get them all converted. Not a problem. Evolution is a religious group. There's no scientific evidence that any animals ever produced a different kind of animal. They believe that dogs and bananas are related, but that's a religious belief. That's not a scientific fact. Certainly not even a scientific theory. It's a hypothesis. There's no evidence at all, zero, So evolution is one of the biggest and dumbest religions in the history of humanity. So the fact that some religions in the world, or even most religions in the world, don't teach the Earth is 6,000 years old may or may not be true. He might be right about that. It doesn't matter. What does that mean? There was a time when people thought the Earth was flat, and people thought you take your blood out and you'll get better. You know, George Washington was bled to death by his doctors trying to get him well, because most people in the world believed in the doctrine of humors. So it doesn't take much of a study of the history of science to see that they've been wrong. The majority's been wrong many times through history. Matter of fact, most of the time here they're wrong about something. And so, was it Aristotle or Plato or one of them had everything made out of 4 different elements: fire, wind, earth, and I forget.
Aristotle. Yeah.
They taught the phlogiston theory for a while. So the fact that a bunch of people today think the Earth is billions of years old, that may be true. That doesn't make it true that it is billions of years old. It's just true that some people believe that. So I'm working on it. I'm trying. Get me out of prison, and I'll keep going. Okay?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. This is kind of a statement by him. What makes the United States a world leader is our technology, innovation, our new ideas. If we continue to eschew science, eschew the process, and try to divide our science into observational science and historical science, we won't move forward. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I don't know that that's all true, but let's assume it is. That's exactly what evolution is doing. It's one of the greatest hindrances to scientific advancement. It's a retarded theory. It's dumb. We don't ever see an animal produce a different kind of animal. Zero, none. There's no evidence for it. So I think if his statement is true or partly true, it applies to evolution, not creation. It was the folks who believed in creation that founded this great land. Hello, read the documents. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They're endowed by their creator with certain rights, life, liberty, etc. So it's exactly the belief in creation that is responsible for the greatness of America's founding. I don't think you can find any scientific advancements, no improvements, no technology improvements, no inventions that can be traced to a belief in evolution. That's not why we have cars or diesel engines or rotary engines or internal combustion engines or rockets that go to the moon. And that has nothing to do with evolution. So that's a silly argument and a straw man, or actually called a red herring, to try to draw people off the track. The meaningless statement that he just gave, meaningless. Okay, next one.
Okay, here's another one of his statements. These people, with their deeply held religious beliefs, they embrace that whole literal interpretation of the Bible as it is written in English, as a worldview. And the same time they accept aspirin, antibiotic drugs, airplanes, but they are able to hold these two worldviews, and that to me is a mystery.
Okay, well, that probably is a mystery to him. I don't question that, but it's not two worldviews. It's one worldview. The Creator created man with a great intelligence and an ability to do things, and the fact that some really smart people can design a machine that flies like an airplane, what does that have to do with evolution? That's silly to say it's two different worldviews. It's not. I like flying in airplanes, I like cars, I like technology, I like computers, and I believe in creation. No conflict whatsoever. When I see a complicated machine like a computer, I say, wow, somebody must have designed this. When I see a complicated body part like an eyeball or an ear or a fingernail, I say, wow, somebody must have designed this. It is not contradictory to believe in creation and to marvel at the creation. You can study cars and how they work and become a great mechanic and still believe that cars are made by people. Can't you? I mean, sometimes you see a complex machine and you want to take it apart and find out how they did it and why. So, okay, that's different than saying nobody did it. So what some people like Bill Nye are trying to do is they look at a complex thing like the human body and say, okay, how did it evolve? Stop right there. No. How is it designed? How does this? So I see that all the great inventions of the past 400 or 500 years were done by creationists, people who believe there's a creator and they're searching for why. You know, Isaac Newton, how many things did he design? What does evolution have to do with any of these great inventions? Even if evolution theory is true, it's 100% useless. It's of no commercial value. None. Zero. Okay, next question.
I stopped at the side of the road today and just picked up a piece of limestone that had a fossil right here. And he points to it. They live typically 20 years, sometimes more than that if the water conditions are correct. And so we're standing on millions of layers of ancient life. How could those animals have lived their entire lives and formed these layers in just 4,000 years?
I don't know where he's getting the 4,000 years. Today, the Earth is 70% underwater. We don't know what it was before the flood. We know the water, most of the water was down in the crust of the Earth from Psalm 24, from Psalm 36, and Psalm 130, Psalm 33 and Psalm 136. So I think that if the Earth before the flood came was perfect and animals could produce prolifically and there was no death, you'd have zillions of babies of everything and everything would survive. So you could very quickly have a world full of animals and plants and everything was wonderful and fine. So is he trying to say because there are so many fossils it couldn't happen? Actually, from the creation to the flood was less than 1,700 years, not 4,000. But yeah, the flood that destroyed that world would bury everything. And so to me, that is not an argument at all, that there couldn't be enough fossils. It's true we're standing on top of limestone layers that contain billions, maybe even trillions of fossils. Okay? Go gather up a cubic mile of seawater near the beach, near the tidal zone, and see how many creatures live there, packed in tightly. How many termites are there in 1 cubic yard of a termite mound? Or how many ants, or how many amoebas? I mean, that's a ridiculous argument. Yes, animals can reproduce quickly, and if there's no death until man sinned, and then massive death when the flood came, I don't see a problem with what he's saying at all with limestone layers forming because of that flood. Okay?
Okay. I guess he has a team that does this. My team drills into the ice with hollow drill bits. Snow ice forms over the winter, snowflakes fall and are crushed down by subsequent layers. We find certain of the cylinders to have 680,000 layers. That's 680,000 snow, winter, summer cycles. How could it be that just 4,000 years ago, all of this ice formed?
Okay, I cover that on my video number 1 in great detail. He's simply wrong about a couple things. One, they haven't found 600,000 layers, but they have found way more than 4,000. Okay? I talk about the lost squadron, the airplanes that landed in World War II in Greenland. When they went and dug them out of the ice in 1990, I think, and all the details are on my video number 1 about the ice cores. When they drilled down to get to those planes that had been in the ice for 48 years, they found hundreds of layers of ice on top of them. Those are not summer-winter cycles. They're warm, cold, warm, cold. You can get 20 or 30 of those in 1 year. So it is not correct. Either he doesn't know or he's lying, but it's not correct to say those are summer-winter cycles. Watch my video 1. Call Bob Cardin, the guy who dug out the Glacier Girl, the airplane they restored from the Lost Squadron. And he'll tell you, well, yeah, we had 268 feet of ice above that airplane in 48 years, and it had hundreds and hundreds of layers. So Bill Nye thinks those are annual layers. He's mistaken. As far as his team, I don't know what he means by that, but I went to Denver, Colorado, to the National Ice Core Laboratory where the guys who drill those cores out store them. I put on a big heavy-duty suit and was still freezing, went into that 30-degree below-zero freezer, and saw the ice cores myself. I talked to the guys who did the drilling. I agree. The ice seems to show layers. Milky layer, clear layer, milky layer, clear layer. That does not represent seasons. It represents warm, cold, warm, cold. When the ice can melt on the surface and turn to water and then refreeze, it lets the air bubbles escape, so it becomes clear ice. When it's only packed snow, it traps the air bubbles and becomes white-colored ice. The deeper you go, the more it gets squished out, and I don't think you can get 600,000 layers. I'd have to see the evidence for that. But even if there are, that's still not proof of 600,000 years. Watch video number 1 where I cover that whole topic in great detail with slides and everything documented. And say, Bill, you really ought to watch this. I give the phone numbers and everything in there. Just call people. He's mistaken. at best. Okay, next question.
Whoa, Mr. Hovind. Okay, wouldn't someone have noticed that there's been winter, summer for 170 times in 1 year?
You can get 5 different layers of ice in 1 week. If it warms up in the daytime and melts the surface and then snows a little bit that evening and melts the next day at noon and snows at night, yes, you could get many layers in one. You could get several layers in 1 day. Ask the people who dug up. It was a simple proof positive test. Airplanes are always built nose heavy, so if the motor quits, they can coast in nose first instead of tail first, which would be hard to steer. The Glacier Girl, the airplanes were still flat level on the ground, indicating they did not sink through the ice. The ice formed above them. And it all happened in 48 years, hundreds of layers of ice. So just watch my video 1 and see for yourself.
You find layer upon layer of ancient rocks, and if there was this enormous flood that you speak of, wouldn't there have been churning, bubbling, and roiling? How would these things have settled out?
Well, how does he know it's ancient rock? I mean, pick up a rock and tell me how old it is. Do they have a date on it somehow? How do you know it's ancient rock? Walt Brown, physics professor at the Air Force Academy for years and now retired living in Phoenix, Arizona, has a great book on that and the rock strata. His book is called In the Beginning. His website is creationscience.com. If you want a really, really long, detailed scientific explanation, you need to go there. But no, certain types of rock, like granite, are not sedimentary rock. Nobody knows how granite formed. I mean, it's been 8.5 years since I've seen my computer, but there's a guy in Knoxville, Tennessee, who has done a great research on granites around the world. Robert Gentry. If you watch my video number 6, I show his phone number, address, and me sitting next to him talking about looking for radiopolonium halos. You can probably Google that, radiopolonium, P-O-L-O-N-I-U-M, halos, H-A-L-O-S, and see research that granites were formed instantly, not slowly cooling over thousands or even millions of years or even a few minutes. They were formed instantly. So there's plenty of research indicating granites had to be created. Now, basalts, which are barely the deeper rocks down in the crust of the earth, are also not sedimentary rock. There are 3 types of rock: igneous, meaning born from a fire like lava; sedimentary rock from sediments like flood sediments; and metamorphic rock changed by heat and pressure. Any earth science book will teach those. So I don't understand his question exactly, but he's saying, why aren't these rocks mixed up better in different layers? Is that it?
Yes, well, and he's talking about the ice caps, is what the drilling. I thought we were finished with that, but the drilling of the cylinders, and he's wondering,
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they drill it like taking a pipe with teeth around the edge and drilling down in, and when you pull it up, it snaps off the middle and brings up what's called an ice core. And they're about, 4 or 6 inches in diameter, I forget. But they store them in styrofoam tubes and bring them back in Denver and store them in a big freezer. Extremely expensive way to prove nothing, in my opinion. Waste of time. If they want to do that on their private funds, that's fine, but they want everybody to pay for that. That's a tax-funded project that to me is silly, but they can do that on their own expense. And same with going to the moon. If you want to go, go. You want me to pay for it? No, I don't want to pay for that.
Yeah.
But that's another story. Why don't they fund my research projects?
Yeah. Right.
So the ice cores are nothing but proof of a recent creation. Why is the ice at the South Pole only 3 miles thick or whatever it is? If it keeps accumulating and it never can't flow away because the ground's too flat, that's quite an interesting study. And Walt Brown's book has great research on that.
If you find, and this is regards to petrified trees being in multiple layers over millions of years or whatever, hundreds of million years. If you find 45 million year old rock on top of 45,000 year old trees, maybe the rock slid on top of them. Maybe that's it. That seems like a much more reasonable explanation.
How does he know this rock is 45 million years old? See, they start with the assumption that evolution is true, which is a false assumption. It's not. It's a dumb theory. Okay, it's not. It's a religion. And then they date everything based upon the fossils that they think lived at that time. For instance, they have trilobites. They call it an index fossil. So if you find a trilobite that is supposed to be the index fossil for a rock that is, say, 600 million years old, or whatever number they made up. Okay, well, what if we find living trilobites? Would that prove that the entire dating geologic column is crazy? There are loads of what are called living fossils where they find they're still alive. So if they're still alive today, like the coelacanth, that was the index fossil. If you found a coelacanth, you'd say, oh, wow, that rock is 35 million years old, or whatever number they put on it. And then they found them swimming around in the Indian Ocean. Well, then that would mean that all of your rocks dated by this coelacanth, the index fossil, are wrong. They don't seem to understand or recognize the obvious. It's just silly. So I would say study index fossils, and I covered that on my video number 6 as well. Okay.
Hold on there, Mr. Hovind. Okay, you're saying that our dating methods are unreliable? I'm sorry. Our as far as dating goes, our methods are incredibly reliable. What say you?
I think they're worse than unreliable. I think they're stupid. I think they're wrong, and I think they're greatly exaggerated. And I think it's a passing fad. This all started, this whole idea of dating stuff, with Charles Lyell in 1830. So it's been around 180 years, and it's not true. There is no place on planet Earth where you can find the entire geologic column except in the textbook. It doesn't exist. It's true the Earth has layers, but it's not true they're always in a certain order. Sometimes there are whole sections, what they would consider millions and millions of years, completely missing. Completely missing. And I would go to, again, Walt Brown's book for great detail and documentation of that, or my video number 6, because I haven't seen my computer in 101 months now, but that's all covered on video number 6 and with my PowerPoint slides. So yes, your dating method is dumb. Real dumb.
Okay.
In my humble opinion.
Okay. Well, okay. So, I understand that you take the Bible as written in English, translated many, many times over the last 3 millennia, as to be more accurate or more reasonable assessment of the natural laws we see around us than what I and everyone can observe. That to me is unsettling.
Okay.
It's troubling.
Well, you need to be unsettled a little bit. If you believe you came from a rock, we need to unsettle that idea for sure. But as far as the Bible being translated many, many times, where do you get that? God wrote it or had people write it in Hebrew and then in Greek, the New Testament. And the King James translators got as many documents as they could, I think over 5,000, and they went right back to the originals and translated it to English. They did compare with the Latin translations and the German translations and see how other people did it. But it is not correct to say it's been translated many, many times. God has an obligation to preserve His words, like He said He would in Psalm 12, 6, and 7. And yes, I do believe He preserved it for the English people in the King James Version. That is my position. Can I prove that? Well, no. Show me something wrong. I'd like to see, if you know of it as something where it's wrong, I'd like to see that. But Aristotle's dictum was, if you're going to argue with a document, the benefit of the doubt goes to the document because it can't talk back. So show me an error in the King James Version and we can discuss that. Until then, I'm going to believe that it is indeed God's preserved word. So you have created a mistake in your question by saying it's been translated hundreds of times or many, many times. That's simply not true. Thirdly, even if it had been translated many times, God can still preserve it. I can send a message in English and somebody translate it to Morse code, and they translate it to sign language, and they translate it to smoke signals, and they translate it to French, German, Swahili, and Botswanaland language, and end up still getting correct. It's not, if it's preserved by somebody supernatural like God. So being translated many times, it again is a red herring. It doesn't. That's not part of it. Who cares? I don't think it was. But even if it was, God could have preserved it through those translations. And yes, I do believe the Bible is correct. I think our modern scientific establishment has changed its theories and beliefs many, many times through history. And they need to again on this evolution idea. It's dumb. It didn't happen. Dogs produce dogs. End of story. You might get a big dog or a little dog, but you're never going to get a termite or a whale from a dog. And they don't have a common ancestor either. There's no evidence of that. People can believe it if they want, but that's a religion, and I resent paying for that in the public schools.
Okay. Well, I've got to say this about the disease thing in the Bible. Are the fish sinners? Let me ask you that.
The whole creation is suffering and groaning and travailing in pain because of man's sin, according to the Bible. Man introduced death and suffering to the planet. It spread from there. Were the babies that in the Hitler gassed in the gas chambers, were they sinners? No. Hitler was a sinner. Hitler did the evil and the wrong, and innocent people suffered because of it. Innocent people often suffer because of evil people. It's not over yet. God's going to set everything straight. Relax, okay? It's not over. So, as far as were the fish sinners? So that's a silly question. Fish eat each other. Animals eat fish. Maybe fish are just complicated, self-replicating food sources. I don't know. But I know that everything suffers. The whole creation is groaning and travailing until they're redeemed. And God promised He's going to fix it all back one day. And I'm looking forward to that. And I would like Bill to be there. I'd like him to get saved, get converted, get his sins forgiven, and come to heaven with me. I think it'd be great. He needs to come. We'd love to have him. I think there's one more spot at the table.
Okay, last question. Your assertion that all animals were vegetarians before they got onto the ark. That's really remarkable. I have not spent a lot of time with lions, but I can tell you they have teeth that are not set up for broccoli.
Wow, what a statement. Well, let's see. A lot of animals have sharp teeth that are vegetarians. During the World War II, the London Zoo could not get meat for their animals, especially their lions, and so they fed them vegetables for the whole duration of the war. And they survived. They didn't like it, but they made it, okay? Sharp teeth does not indicate carnivorous. It can, but there are lots of animals today with sharp teeth that are vegetarian. Or watch my video number, I think it's 4, lies in the textbooks where I cover that. Grizzly bears can live fine on fruit, nuts, and berries. And they would like to get a picnic basket if they could. Yogi would once in a while, but they can survive on fruits, nuts, and berries. So it is incorrect. I covered even the mosquitoes on there about them being sucking juice out of plants. I got pictures of mosquitoes sucking juice out of the figs in my backyard on the fig tree. Now, if a female mosquito is pregnant, she wants to give blood to feed the babies, but it's not required. Less of the eggs will develop if she doesn't get any blood, if she only gets fruit juice. But they can live just fine on fruit juice. Hollywood had a lion they used for years in movies called Little Tyke, Tyke. You can Google that. I think Answers in Genesis website has a long article called Little Tyke. That was a huge African lion that refused to eat meat, ever. I had a lady come to a seminar one time and said, Brother Hovind, we raise dogs. We have a kennel full of dogs, and we've got a bunch of them that refuse meat. They just only eat plants and vegetables and fruit. So he's simply not correct. You can't go by teeth and say that means anything necessarily. Okay?
Thank you for this debate, and we will like to have you back, Mr. Hovind.
I would be thrilled to debate Bill Nye or any atheist or evolutionist anytime. Pray me out of here first, and I'd be glad to. I have a couple simple requirements. I'll take on 10 at a time. It can be 10 against 1. However, I get half the time, and we talk about one topic at a time. I did a debate with P.Z. Myers, who's Atheist of the Year, and that's up on 2peter3.com in booklet form. The title is Whose Mouths Must Be Stopped. It was an email debate back and forth a year ago. 58-page booklet. I would suggest people read that. So if Bill Nye or any evolutionist want to debate me, they're on. I accept. Half my brain tied behind my back. Okay?
If you like that, brother, I can go ahead and pull stuff from Richard Dawkins and stuff online, and we can continue doing this along with Bible questions if you'd like.
That's wonderful. Put it up. Yeah, go for it. Do it for Dawkins or anybody.